I discovered my 8-year-old daughter, Sophie, crying in her bedroom, holding pieces of a shattered MacBook Pro. Through her tears, she explained how Grandpa destroyed her birthday present after Cousin Tyler claimed it was his. The expensive laptop I saved for months to buy lay in fragments on the floor. Sophie whispered that everyone at the party laughed when Tyler grabbed it and nobody defended her. My heart broke seeing my daughter's devastation, knowing my own father chose his spoiled nephew over his granddaughter's happiness. 2 hours earlier, I had walked into the Riverside Community Center carrying what I thought would be the perfect surprise for Sophie's 8th birthday. The rectangular box wrapped in shimmering purple paper contained a brand new MacBook Pro that had cost me $2,100. I had worked overtime shifts at my construction management job for 3 months, skipping dinners out and canceling weekend plans to save every penny for this moment. The party room buzzed with energy as 20 kids from Sophie's 2nd grade class ran around playing tag between the decorated tables. Colorful balloons bobbed from chair backs, and a magnificent unicorn cake sat waiting on the main table. My ex-wife Sarah was arranging party favors while chatting with other parents who had stayed to supervise their children. My family occupied the corner table near the gift station. My father Gerald, a 72-year-old retired factory supervisor with steel gray hair and permanent scowl lines, sat rigidly upright in his folding chair. His weathered hands gripped his coffee cup like he was holding court at some serious business meeting rather than a child's birthday celebration. Next to him, my mother Martha nervously adjusted napkins and picked invisible lint from the tablecloth, her anxious energy radiating across the space. My sister Amy lounged in her chair with the casual confidence of someone who believed the world revolved around her convenience. At 38, she had perfected the art of appearing put together while chaos swirled around her 12-year-old son Tyler. The kid bounced between tables, grabbing handfuls of candy from decoration bowls and interrupting other children's conversations with loud proclamations about his video game achievements. I set the wrapped MacBook on the gift table with genuine excitement. Sophie had been talking about digital art classes at school for weeks, explaining how the computer lab's ancient machines couldn't handle the advanced drawing program she wanted to explore. Her teacher had mentioned that Sophie showed real artistic talent and would benefit from having her own equipment at home to practice new techniques. When gift opening time arrived, Sophie settled cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by her friends. She carefully unwrapped each present with the methodical attention that made her such a thoughtful kid. Books, art supplies, and toys accumulated in neat piles around her as she thanked each gift giver with genuine appreciation. Then she reached my present. Her eyes widened as she peeled away the purple wrapping paper to reveal the sleek Apple logo on the white box. Before she could even process what she was holding, Tyler suddenly lunged forward from across the circle. He ripped the box completely open, scattering cardboard pieces and protective foam padding across the floor. The MacBook tumbled out of its packaging as Tyler grabbed it with both hands and shouted at the top of his voice, "The MacBook is mine. I need this for middle school projects." Laughter erupted from several adults who assumed they were witnessing typical sibling-style competition. Even some parents chuckled and shook their heads as if Tyler's behavior was nothing more than harmless childhood antics. The kids sat frozen, unsure whether this was part of some planned entertainment or something they should feel uncomfortable about. Sophie's face crumpled with confusion and hurt. She reached tentatively toward the laptop, but Tyler clutched it against his chest and backed away from her. "I called it first," he announced with the supreme confidence of a kid who had never been told no about anything that mattered to him. My protective instincts flared immediately. I stepped forward and used my calmest parenting voice, the tone I reserved for moments when I needed to be absolutely clear without escalating drama. "Tyler, that's Sophie's birthday gift. You need to give it back to her right now." The room fell quiet as parents realized this wasn't playful behavior anymore. Sarah stopped arranging napkins and turned toward our corner with obvious concern. Martha's hands fluttered nervously around her coffee cup, while she shot worried glances between Tyler and Gerald. But instead of diffusing the situation, my intervention triggered something much worse. Gerald suddenly rose from his chair, with the deliberate movement of a man who had decided to take control of what he considered an unacceptable challenge to his authority. His face flushed red with anger as he strode across the small space between our table and the gift-opening area. Without any warning or discussion, he grabbed the MacBook directly from Tyler's hands. Sophie looked up with hope, thinking her grandfather was going to return her present and restore order to her special day. Instead, Gerald raised the laptop above his head and smashed it down against the concrete floor with shocking violence. The crack of breaking plastic and metal echoed through the suddenly silent community center as pieces of the computer scattered across the floor. "This is punishment for being selfish," Gerald shouted, his voice carrying the authority he had wielded over our family for decades. "Children need to learn they can't always get what they want when other people have greater needs." Amy immediately jumped to her feet, nodding vigorously in support of her father's actions. "Tyler has homework assignments and research projects," she declared, as if this justified the destruction of Sophie's gift. "He needs a computer way more than she does for whatever little art games she wants to play." The room erupted in uncomfortable murmurs as parents exchanged shocked glances. Several mothers instinctively moved closer to their own children, suddenly protective in the face of such unexpected aggression. The kids stared at the broken computer pieces with wide eyes, some beginning to tear up as they absorbed the violence they had just witnessed. Sophie sat motionless on the floor, staring at the fragments of her destroyed present. Tears rolled silently down her cheeks as she tried to process why her grandfather would hurt her on her birthday. The carefully planned celebration had transformed into a nightmare of family dysfunction, playing out in front of her classmates and their parents. Sarah finally found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "Gerald, that was completely inappropriate. You just destroyed Hank's gift to his daughter." But Gerald wasn't finished asserting his dominance. He turned toward me with the cold stare that had intimidated me throughout my childhood. "Your daughter needs to understand that the world doesn't revolve around her wants and wishes. Tyler has academic requirements that matter more than some spoiled little girl's art hobbies." That moment crystallized everything wrong with my family's dynamics. Gerald had always favored Amy and Tyler, treating them as if their needs automatically superseded anyone else's. But destroying Sophie's birthday gift in front of her friends crossed every line of decent behavior I could imagine. The silence in the community center felt suffocating as parents began gathering their children and making awkward excuses about needing to leave early. Kids whispered among themselves, casting nervous glances toward the broken laptop pieces still scattered across the floor. What should have been a joyful celebration had devolved into a spectacle of family cruelty that no one knew how to address. I knelt down beside Sophie, who remained frozen in place staring at the destruction. Her small hands trembled as she reached toward one of the larger fragments, a piece of the screen that reflected the overhead lights in jagged patterns. When she looked up at me, her eyes held a devastation that no 8-year-old should ever experience. "Why does Grandpa hate me, Daddy?" she whispered so quietly that only I could hear her question. The words hit me like a physical blow, carrying the weight of years of favoritism and dismissal that I had tried to shield her from. Before I could answer, Gerald launched into a lecture about character building and the importance of children learning disappointment. He spoke as if destroying a $2,100 gift was some kind of valuable life lesson rather than an act of deliberate cruelty. Martha stood behind him, wringing her hands but saying nothing to contradict her husband's justifications. Amy seized the opportunity to pile on additional criticism. "Hank spoils Sophie constantly, while Tyler has to make do with outdated equipment for his schoolwork. she announced to anyone still listening. Maybe now Sophie will appreciate what she has, instead of always expecting expensive presents. The accusation stung because it was completely backwards. Tyler received new clothes, electronics, and toys whenever he expressed the slightest interest, while Sophie treasured every small gift and took careful care of her possessions. Amy's version of reality existed in some alternate universe where Tyler was disadvantaged and Sophie was privileged. Sarah finally stepped forward with more authority, though her voice still shook with anger and disbelief. This is absolutely unacceptable behavior from adults who should know better. You've traumatized Sophie on her birthday and destroyed something Hank worked hard to afford. Gerald dismissed Sarah's objections with a wave of his hand. This family has survived just fine without outsiders telling us how to handle our children, he said, deliberately emphasizing the word outsiders to remind Sarah that our divorce meant her opinions carried no weight in his mind. The remaining parents gathered their kids and headed for the exit, with obvious discomfort. I heard fragments of their conversations as they passed our table, expressions of sympathy for Sophie, mixed with shock at Gerald's behavior. Several mothers hugged their own children protectively, as if witnessing such casual destruction of a child's joy had reminded them how quickly a happy moment could turn frightening. Sophie finally stood up on unsteady legs, still clutching the broken screen fragment. She walked slowly toward the bathroom, probably seeking privacy, for the emotional breakdown that was building behind her carefully controlled expression. Sarah followed her without asking permission, her maternal instincts overriding any concern about family politics. With Sophie temporarily out of earshot, I confronted Gerald directly. You had absolutely no right to destroy her gift. That laptop cost me over $2,000 and 3 months of overtime work. Gerald straightened to his full height, using the physical intimidation tactics that had worked throughout my childhood. I had every right to teach that child a lesson about gratitude and sharing. You've been filling her head with ideas about being special instead of teaching her proper family values. Wine. Family values. I repeated, struggling to keep my voice controlled. What values are you teaching her that adults can destroy children's possessions when they feel like making a point? That her needs don't matter as much as Tyler's wants? Amy inserted herself into the conversation with renewed energy. Tyler deserves consideration too. He's struggling with 6th grade computer assignments while Sophie gets handed expensive electronics for hobbies. Someone needed to address the unfairness. The twisted logic left me speechless for a moment. Tyler owned a gaming laptop, an iPad, and a smartphone, all purchased by Amy whenever he claimed to need them for school. Meanwhile, Sophie had been using library computers for her art projects because we couldn't afford additional technology until now. Martha spoke for the first time since the destruction, her voice barely audible above the air conditioning. Maybe we should all calm down and discuss this privately at home. But I was done with private discussions that allowed Gerald's behavior to continue without consequences. There's nothing to discuss privately. You destroyed my daughter's property in front of witnesses. That's not a family disagreement, it's destruction of property. Gerald's eyes narrowed dangerously. Are you threatening me, son? The word son carried decades of manipulation and control. He had used that exact tone countless times throughout my life to remind me that challenging his authority would result in punishment or rejection. But watching Sophie's devastation had triggered something protective that overrode my childhood conditioning. I'm not threatening you. I'm telling you that actions have consequences, and destroying a $2,000 laptop isn't something you can just dismiss with lectures about character building. Amy stepped closer to Gerald in a show of solidarity. We're family, Hank. Family members work things out together instead of making legal threats over misunderstandings. Misunderstanding? The word exploded out of me louder than I intended. There's no misunderstanding here. You planned this. Tyler didn't just randomly decide he needed Sophie's laptop. You told him it should be his. before we ever got to the party. The accusation hit home based on Amy's sudden defensiveness. Tyler mentioned that he needed a better computer for school projects. I might have told him that Sophie was too young for such expensive equipment. Gerald nodded approvingly at Amy's explanation. Your sister was looking out for Tyler's educational needs. Children should receive gifts appropriate to their age and maturity level. Sarah emerged from the bathroom supporting Sophie, who had obviously been crying, but was trying to compose herself for the remaining adults. She clutched a damp paper towel and avoided eye contact with Gerald and Amy, instinctively recognizing them as threats to her emotional safety. The sight of my daughter's red-rimmed eyes and careful distance from her grandfather filled me with a protective rage that threatened to overwhelm my self-control. Sophie had always been cautious around Gerald, sensing his disapproval, even when she couldn't articulate why he made her uncomfortable. Now she would carry the memory of him deliberately destroying her happiness. I made a decision that surprised even me. Instead of continuing the argument or trying to salvage the party, I gathered up the broken laptop pieces and put my arm around Sophie's shoulders. We're leaving now, I announced. Sophie shouldn't have to spend another minute around people who think hurting her is acceptable. Gerald called after us as we headed for the door. Running away won't teach her how to handle disappointment in the real world. I paused at the exit and turned back toward him. The real world doesn't include grandfathers who destroy children's gifts to prove points about favoritism. That's just dysfunction disguised as discipline. As we walked to my truck, Sophie leaned against my side and asked the question that would haunt me for months. Daddy, do you think Grandpa would have broken Tyler's present if I had grabbed it instead? The answer was obvious to both of us, but hearing her voice it aloud crystallized the deliberate cruelty of what had happened. Gerald hadn't been teaching a lesson about sharing or gratitude. He had been punishing Sophie for receiving something that Amy wanted Tyler to have instead. Driving home through the suburban streets of our small Illinois town, I realized that this incident represented years of accumulated favoritism and dismissal that I had tried to minimize or excuse. But watching Sophie cradle broken computer pieces while asking why her grandfather hated her had shattered my willingness to protect Gerald's reputation at her expense. The time for private family discussions and quiet conflict resolution had ended the moment Gerald chose violence over conversation. Now Sophie needed to learn that adults who hurt children face consequences even when those adults are family members with decades of unchallenged authority. That night, as I tucked Sophie into bed, she asked if we could still have birthday cake even though the party had been ruined. Her resilience and hope despite the trauma she had experienced filled me with both admiration and determination. She deserved better than adults who treated her feelings as expendable, and I was going to make sure she got it. I spent most of that night pacing around my kitchen table with my laptop open, diving deep into Illinois statutes on property destruction and family law. Sophie had finally fallen asleep around 9 o'clock exhausted from crying and confused about why her special day had turned into such a nightmare. The broken MacBook pieces sat in a cardboard box on my counter, physical evidence of what felt like a deliberate assault on my daughter's sense of safety and worth. The legal research proved more encouraging than I had expected. Intentional destruction of property valued over $1,000 constituted criminal mischief in the second degree, regardless of the relationship between perpetrator and victim. Gerald's claim that he was teaching Sophie a lesson about sharing wouldn't provide legal protection for destroying something that belonged to her. I documented everything I could remember about the incident while the details remained fresh. The premeditation aspect bothered me most because Tyler's immediate claim to Sophie's gift suggested advanced planning. Kids don't usually announce ownership of presents they've never seen unless adults have prepared them for that moment. Around 2 in the morning, I found contact information for Patricia Wells, a family law attorney who specialized in grandparent rights disputes and child protection cases. Her website included several articles about documenting family conflicts, and establishing healthy boundaries with toxic relatives. I sent her a detailed email explaining the situation and requesting a consultation. By morning, I had compiled a comprehensive timeline of events, including witness names and contact information for parents who had attended the party. Several people had left their details with Sarah when they departed early, expressing concern about Sophie's welfare and Gerald's aggressive behavior. Patricia Wells called before 8 o'clock, having reviewed my email, and determined that the case warranted immediate attention. Her voice carried the professional warmth of someone accustomed to helping families navigate complex emotional situations. Mr. Thompson, what happened to your daughter represents several potential legal violations, she explained during our initial phone consultation. The destruction of property is obvious, but the psychological impact on a child during her birthday celebration could support additional charges related to child endangerment. She advised me to contact local police to file a formal report emphasizing that family relationships don't exempt anyone from criminal statutes regarding property destruction. The fact that multiple witnesses observed the incident would strengthen any case we decided to pursue. The key question, Patricia continued, is what outcome you're seeking. Are you looking for financial restitution, legal consequences for the perpetrator, or protection from future incidents? I hadn't fully considered the range of available options, but her question helped clarify my priorities. I want Sophie to feel safe and protected. I want my family to understand that hurting her has consequences. And I want restitution for the destroyed laptop so I can replace it. Those are reasonable goals that the legal system can address, she assured me. Document everything, gather witness statements, and file the police report today. We'll schedule an in-person meeting once you've completed those initial steps. After breakfast, while Sophie watched cartoons and seemed somewhat recovered from the previous day's trauma, I began calling parents who had witnessed Gerald's outburst. The conversations proved more supportive than I had anticipated. Jessica Martinez, whose daughter Emma was Sophie's closest friend, expressed immediate concern about the incident. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, she said. My husband and I talked about it all night. That poor little girl looked absolutely devastated, and the adults just stood there arguing instead of comforting her. She agreed to provide a written statement describing what she had observed, including Tyler's immediate claim to the laptop and Gerald's violent response to my request that Tyler return the gift. Her perspective as an uninvolved observer would carry significant weight if legal proceedings became necessary. David Kim, father of another classmate, offered similar support. Look, I've seen kids fight over toys before, but I've never witnessed an adult deliberately destroy a child's birthday present. That crossed every line of appropriate behavior. He had noticed Tyler's confident assumption that the laptop belonged to him, suggesting that the boy had been prepared for that moment. Kids don't usually grab expensive electronics unless they've been told they're entitled to them, David observed. By noon, I had statements from 5 witnesses describing Gerald's actions and the family dynamics they had observed. Several parents mentioned feeling uncomfortable with Amy's support for her father's behavior and her dismissal of Sophie's emotional distress. The most disturbing revelation came from Linda Foster, whose 10-year-old son had played with Tyler at previous family gatherings. Tyler has bragged about getting presents that were meant for Sophie, she told me. He said his mom always makes sure he gets better stuff because he's older and more important. This pattern of entitlement explained why Tyler felt comfortable seizing Sophie's gift without hesitation. Amy had apparently been reinforcing the idea that Tyler deserved priority consideration in all family situations, regardless of the occasion or the intended recipient. Around 1 o'clock, my phone rang with Amy's number on the display. I almost declined the call, but curiosity about her perspective convinced me to answer. Hank, we need to talk about yesterday. She began without any greeting or acknowledgement of the damage her family had caused. Dad feels terrible about breaking Sophie's computer, but you really overreacted to what was essentially a family misunderstanding. The casual dismissal of Sophie's trauma as a misunderstanding confirmed that Amy still didn't grasp the seriousness of what had occurred. There was no misunderstanding Amy. Gerald deliberately destroyed a $2,000 gift while Sophie watched. That's not something families just work out privately. Look, Tyler really does need a laptop for his schoolwork, and Sophie is too young to appreciate something that expensive. Maybe you could buy Tyler a computer to replace the one Dad accidentally broke, and we'll get Sophie something more age-appropriate for her next birthday. The audacity of her suggestion left me speechless for several seconds. She was essentially proposing that I reward Tyler's behavior and Gerald's destruction by purchasing the laptop Tyler had tried to steal from Sophie. Are you seriously suggesting that I buy Tyler a computer because your father destroyed Sophie's birthday gift? I asked, needing confirmation that I had heard correctly. Family members help each other out, Amy replied with the entitled tone she had perfected over decades of getting her way. Tyler shouldn't suffer because Dad lost his temper with Sophie's attitude. Sophie's attitude. She was sitting quietly opening her presents when Tyler grabbed her laptop and declared it his property. Amy sighed dramatically. You've always been oversensitive about Sophie's feelings. She needs to learn that other people have needs too, especially family members with legitimate requirements. The conversation revealed the depths of Amy's delusion about family dynamics and her son's behavior. In her mind, Tyler's wants automatically superseded Sophie's rights, and any resistance to that principle constituted unfair treatment of her child. Here's what's going to happen. I said, my patience finally exhausted. I'm filing a police report for destruction of property. I'm consulting with an attorney about legal options. And I'm making sure Sophie understands that adults who hurt children face consequences. Amy's voice turned sharp with threat. Dad won't tolerate legal challenges from his own son. You could find yourself cut out of the family permanently if you pursue this ridiculous overreaction. That's not a threat, Amy. That's a promise I'm hoping you'll keep. I hung up before she could respond, finally understanding that protecting Sophie required accepting the loss of relationships with people who viewed her as expendable. The choice between my daughter's well-being and my family's approval wasn't really a choice at all. That afternoon, I drove to the county sheriff's office to file a formal complaint. Officer Maria Rodriguez listened to my account with professional attention, taking detailed notes and asking clarifying questions about the timeline and witness observations. Property destruction cases involving family members require careful documentation, she explained. But when the victim is a child and the destruction was witnessed by multiple people, we take these incidents very seriously. She scheduled a follow-up interview for the next day, advising me to bring copies of witness statements and photographs of the destroyed laptop. The criminal justice system moves slowly, but it moved with authority that Gerald couldn't dismiss or manipulate. Driving home through familiar neighborhoods where I'd grown up under Gerald's authoritarian control, I realized that protecting Sophie required breaking cycles of dysfunction that had shaped my family for generations. The legal case was just the beginning of establishing new boundaries based on respect rather than intimidation. That evening, Sophie asked if we could buy another computer so she could still take the digital art class at school. Her hopeful expression and careful politeness around the subject broke my heart, but it also strengthened my resolve to make sure Gerald's actions carried real consequences. We're going to get you an even better laptop, I promised her, and we're going to make sure nobody ever destroys your things again. She nodded solemnly, trusting me to protect her even though the adults she should have been able to trust had failed her completely. That trust carried more weight than any family loyalty Gerald could demand, and it would guide every decision I made going forward. Officer Rodriguez proved to be exactly the kind of professional advocate Sophie needed. When I arrived at the sheriff's office the following morning with my box of evidence and witness statements, she reviewed everything with methodical attention that demonstrated genuine concern for my daughter's welfare. Property destruction cases often get dismissed as civil matters, she explained while examining photographs of the broken MacBook. But when an adult deliberately destroys a child's birthday gift in front of witnesses, especially after premeditation, it rises to the level of criminal mischief and potentially child endangerment. She had researched Illinois statutes overnight and found precedent cases involving family members who had faced criminal charges for destroying others' property during domestic disputes. The monetary value of the laptop placed Gerald's actions in a felony category that couldn't be dismissed as a simple misunderstanding. The psychological impact on the victim also matters, Rodriguez continued. Your daughter was celebrating her birthday when her grandfather chose to traumatize her in front of her classmates. That demonstrates a level of cruelty that goes beyond ordinary family conflict. Her professional validation of Sophie's experience provided relief I hadn't realized I needed. For 36 hours, I had questioned whether my protective instincts were overriding rational judgment about family dynamics. Rodriguez's assessment confirmed that Gerald's behavior warranted serious consequences. Patricia Wells proved equally supportive during our in-person consultation that afternoon. Her downtown office projected competence and authority, with law books lining the walls, and family photographs suggesting someone who understood both professional excellence and personal commitment to children's welfare. I've reviewed the witness statements and police report, she said, settling behind her mahogany desk with Sophie's case file. Your father's actions constitute multiple violations that could result in both criminal charges and civil liability. She outlined potential legal strategies ranging from restraining orders to supervised visitation requirements, emphasizing that family court judges took allegations of psychological abuse seriously when supported by independent witnesses and documented evidence. The goal isn't necessarily to punish your father, Patricia explained. It's to establish clear boundaries that protect Sophie from future incidents and ensure accountability for past actions. She recommended documenting any additional contact from Gerald or Amy, particularly threats related to family inheritance or social consequences. Their attempts to pressure me into dropping legal action could actually strengthen our case by demonstrating ongoing manipulation and intimidation. Family members who genuinely regret harmful behavior seek to make amends, she noted. Those who respond to accountability with threats reveal their true priorities. The most unexpected support came from my ex-wife Sarah, who called that evening while I was helping Sophie with homework at our kitchen table. Our divorce had ended amicably 2 years earlier, but we had maintained professional rather than friendly interactions focused solely on co-parenting coordination. Hank, I need to tell you something important about what happened at Tyler's school today. She began, her voice carrying unusual urgency. Tyler had apparently been bragging to classmates about destroying Sophie's computer and claiming that she had deserved the punishment. His teacher overheard these comments and contacted Amy about her son's concerning behavior and apparent lack of empathy for his cousin's distress. But here's the really disturbing part, Sarah continued. Tyler told his friends that his mom had promised him Sophie's laptop before the party even started. He said Amy told him that Sophie was too young for expensive electronics and that he deserved them more because of his academic needs. This revelation confirmed the premeditation that I had suspected but couldn't prove. Amy hadn't just supported Gerald's destructive outburst, she had orchestrated the entire conflict by convincing Tyler that he was entitled to Sophie's birthday gift. I should have spoken up at the party, Sarah admitted. I was afraid of confronting your family, but seeing Sophie's pain made me realize that avoiding conflict isn't worth enabling abuse. Her willingness to acknowledge her own failure while supporting Sophie's needs demonstrated genuine growth and courage. Our co-parenting relationship had always been cordial, but distant. This crisis was revealing Sarah's capacity for authentic partnership in protecting our daughter. The most shocking call came at nearly 10 o'clock that night from my mother, Martha, whose voice shook with emotions I had never heard her express before. Hank, I need to see you privately tomorrow, she said, speaking so quietly that I had to strain to hear her words. There are things about your father that you need to understand before this legal situation goes any further. She refused to elaborate over the phone, but insisted that our conversation could change everything about how I approach the case against Gerald. Her secrecy and obvious fear suggested revelations that went far beyond the laptop incident. "Can we meet for coffee at that place on Main Street around 10 in the morning?" she asked. "I'll tell your father I'm running errands so he won't question my absence." The fact that she needed to deceive Gerald about meeting her own son revealed the level of control and surveillance that had shaped their marriage for decades. I agreed to the meeting while wondering what secrets had been hidden behind Martha's carefully maintained facade of family loyalty. The next morning, I arrived at Morrison's Coffee House 15 minutes early to secure a corner table where we could speak privately. Martha appeared precisely at 10 o'clock, glancing nervously around the small restaurant before approaching my table with obvious anxiety. She looked older than her 68 years, with deep worry lines and the cautious movements of someone accustomed to avoiding confrontation. Her hands trembled slightly as she settled into the chair across from me, clutching her purse like a shield against potential threats. "Your father has been controlling our family finances for 42 years. She began without preamble, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been saving money secretly for the past decade because I've been planning to leave him." The revelation stunned me into silence. Martha had always appeared completely devoted to Gerald supporting his decisions and deflecting criticism of his authoritarian behavior. The idea that she had been plotting her escape for years completely contradicted everything I thought I knew about their relationship. "He doesn't know about the savings account I opened at First National." She continued, her confidence growing as she shared her carefully guarded secret. "I've been depositing small amounts from my part-time job at the library, money he never bothered to track because he assumed I spent it on household expenses." She reached into her purse and pulled out a bank statement showing a balance of $8,300 accumulated through years of patient sacrifice and careful planning. "I want to replace Sophie's laptop," Martha said, meeting my eyes for the first time during our conversation. "And I want to help you make sure your father faces consequences for what he did to that precious child." Her transformation from enabler to ally represented a complete reversal of family dynamics that had seemed permanent and unchangeable. The quiet woman who had spent decades deferring to Gerald's authority was revealing herself as someone with her own moral compass and protective instincts. "Why now?" I asked, still processing the implications of her offer. "Because watching him destroy Sophie's birthday gift reminded me of all the times he's hurt people I care about," she replied, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I've spent 40 years making excuses for his cruelty, but I can't watch him traumatize my granddaughter and pretend it's acceptable family discipline." She explained that Gerald had always favored Amy and Tyler, viewing them as extensions of his own authority and status. Sophie represented independence and creativity that threatened his need to control family dynamics, making her a target for his disapproval and punishment. "He's been telling people that Sophie is spoiled and ungrateful," Martha revealed. "But I know the truth. She's a loving, thoughtful child who deserves protection from her grandfather's rage." The meeting lasted 2 hours as Martha shared decades of suppressed observations about Gerald's manipulative behavior and Amy's enabling of Tyler's entitled attitude. Her decision to support Sophie represented years of accumulated resistance finally breaking through fear and habit. When we parted ways in the coffee shop parking lot, Martha hugged me with fierce determination. "That little girl needs to know that someone in this family will fight for her," she said. "I should have been fighting for her all along." Driving home with Martha's bank statement and promise of support, I realized that Sophie's crisis had revealed authentic character in people I thought I understood. Sarah had chosen courage over conflict avoidance, Martha had chosen justice over loyalty, and Officer Rodriguez had chosen protection over convenience. The case against Gerald was becoming something larger than property destruction or family conflict. It was establishing new principles about how adults treat children and what consequences follow when those principles are violated. That afternoon, Sophie asked if Grandma Martha was mad at her for causing trouble between family members. Her concern for others, even after being victimized, demonstrated the empathy and kindness that had made her Gerald's target in the first place. "Grandma Martha is proud of you for being brave," I assured her. "And she's sorry that Grandpa Gerald scared you on your birthday." Sophie nodded thoughtfully before returning to her art project, apparently satisfied that at least one grandparent valued her happiness over family politics. Her resilience continued to amaze me, but it also reinforced my determination to ensure that her trust in adult protection wasn't misplaced. The decision to document everything publicly came to me while watching Sophie practice piano the following Saturday morning. She played with careful concentration, occasionally glancing toward the empty spot where her laptop should have been sitting on the desk beside her music books. The visual reminder of Gerald's destruction sparked an anger that had been building for days. I opened my laptop and began typing a detailed Facebook post about what had happened at Sophie's birthday party. The words flowed easily because the truth didn't require embellishment or careful editing. I described Tyler's immediate seizure of the laptop, Gerald's violent destruction of the gift, and Amy's demand that I buy Tyler a replacement computer. I included photographs of the broken MacBook pieces arranged on my kitchen counter, the fragments creating a stark visual representation of deliberate destruction. Screenshots of Amy's text messages demanding that I purchase Tyler a new laptop provided additional evidence of the family's complete lack of remorse or accountability. Before posting, I tagged all the parents who had witnessed the incident, giving them advance notice that I was making the situation public. Jessica Martinez immediately called to express her support for my decision. "People need to know what really happened," she said. "Your daughter deserves to have her story told truthfully instead of letting your family control the narrative with their excuses and justifications." I tagged Gerald, Amy, and Martha in the post, ensuring they would receive immediate notification when it went live. The text concluded with a simple statement: "Adults who destroy children's birthday gifts to prove points about favoritism need to face public accountability for their choices." Within 20 minutes of posting, the responses began flooding in. Parents from Sophie's class shared the post with expressions of outrage and support. Neighbors who had witnessed Gerald's controlling behavior over the years added their own comments about his pattern of intimidation and manipulation. The post gained momentum throughout the day as people shared it with their own networks. By evening, it had received over 300 shares and hundreds of comments, most expressing shock at Gerald's behavior and sympathy for Sophie's traumatic experience. Amy called around 8 o'clock, her voice shaking with fury. "How dare you embarrass our family with your public tantrum about a simple misunderstanding?" "There was no misunderstanding," I replied calmly. "Everyone who was there saw exactly what happened. I'm just making sure the truth is documented instead of letting you rewrite history." "You've humiliated Dad in front of his entire community," she accused. "His friends and co-workers are seeing these lies about him being cruel to children." "They're not lies, Amy. They're documented facts, supported by multiple witnesses and photographic evidence." The conversation deteriorated quickly as Amy realized that her usual manipulation tactics wouldn't work when confronted with public accountability. She threatened legal action for defamation, apparently unaware that truth provides absolute protection against such claims. Gerald's response came through Martha, who called the next morning with obvious distress. "Your father is beside himself about the social media post," she reported. His veteran organization called an emergency meeting to discuss his continued leadership role. The American Legion post, where Gerald had served as treasurer for 8 years, was reconsidering his position after members expressed concerns about his judgment and treatment of children. Several veterans had grandchildren of their own and found his behavior completely unacceptable. "He's talking about suing you for defamation and harassment," Martha warned. but his lawyer told him that filing suit would only bring more public attention to the incident. The legal advice proved accurate. Patricia Wells confirmed that Gerald had no viable defamation claim, since my post contained only truthful statements supported by witness testimony and physical evidence. Public accountability often provides more effective consequences than legal proceedings alone, she observed. Your family members are learning that their actions have reputations and relationships at stake. The most significant professional consequence came 3 days later when Amy received a call from her supervisor at Family Solutions Network, the nonprofit counseling organization where she worked as a case coordinator. Her role involved helping families resolve conflicts and protect children's welfare, making her support for Gerald's destructive behavior a serious professional liability. They placed me on administrative leave pending investigation, Amy told me during another angry phone call. Co-workers saw your post and questioned my fitness to counsel families about healthy relationships. Her employer's response demonstrated that public accountability could reach into professional spheres where private family dysfunction might otherwise remain hidden. Amy's credibility as a family advocate had been permanently damaged by her defense of child abuse, disguised as discipline. Tyler faced consequences at Roosevelt Middle School when teachers became aware of his bragging about destroying Sophie's computer. The principal contacted Amy for a conference about Tyler's concerning lack of empathy and his apparent belief that he was entitled to other people's property. Tyler doesn't understand why everyone is making such a big deal about a broken computer, Amy complained. He's the real victim here because he still doesn't have a laptop for his schoolwork. Her continued focus on Tyler's wants rather than Sophie's trauma revealed the depth of dysfunction that had enabled the birthday party incident. Even facing professional and social consequences, Amy remained convinced that her son's needs justified any means of obtaining satisfaction. The local news station Channel 12 contacted me after a reporter saw the viral Facebook post. They were interested in covering the story as part of their ongoing series about family boundaries and children's rights during holiday celebrations. We've been exploring how family gatherings sometimes become battlegrounds for adult conflicts, explained reporter Jennifer Walsh. Your daughter's experience represents a disturbing example of children becoming collateral damage in family power struggles. I agreed to the interview with the understanding that Sophie's identity would be protected and that the focus would remain on adult accountability rather than family drama. The segment aired during the Thursday evening news, reaching thousands of additional viewers throughout central Illinois. Gerald's response to the television coverage marked his complete transformation from respected community elder to social pariah. Former friends began avoiding him at the grocery store and hardware store where he conducted his weekly routines. His carefully maintained reputation for wisdom and authority crumbled under public scrutiny of his actual behavior. Martha called Friday morning with the most surprising news yet. Your father lost his part-time job at Peterson's Hardware yesterday, she reported. Mr. Peterson said he couldn't employ someone who destroys children's birthday gifts, especially after the story aired on television. Gerald had worked at the hardware store for 6 years since retiring from the factory, enjoying the social interaction and the respect accorded to his mechanical knowledge. The termination represented both financial loss and public humiliation that he couldn't dismiss or rationalize. He's talking about moving to Arizona to live near his brother, Martha continued. He says this town has turned against him for no good reason. The prospect of Gerald leaving Illinois entirely had never occurred to me, but it would solve multiple problems related to Sophie's ongoing safety and emotional recovery. Distance wouldn't erase the trauma he had caused, but it would eliminate the possibility of future incidents. That weekend, Sophie asked why so many people were talking about her birthday party. She had overheard conversations at school and noticed increased attention from teachers and classmates who were treating her with extra kindness. Sometimes when adults do wrong things, other adults need to help fix the problems, I explained. People are upset because Grandpa Gerald hurt your feelings and they want to make sure it doesn't happen again. She accepted this explanation with the practical wisdom that 8-year-olds often display about adult complications. Her main concern seemed to be whether all the attention meant she was in trouble, requiring reassurance that speaking truth about harmful behavior was always the right choice. The viral social media post had created consequences that extended far beyond anything I had anticipated when I started typing that Saturday morning. Gerald's reputation lay in ruins. Amy's career faced serious jeopardy. Tyler confronted accountability for his entitled behavior, and Sophie witnessed adult advocates rallying to her defense. Public accountability had proven more effective than private negotiations or family meetings in establishing clear boundaries about acceptable treatment of children. The community's response demonstrated that protecting kids from adult dysfunction was a shared responsibility that transcended family loyalty or conflict avoidance. The criminal case against Gerald proceeded with methodical efficiency that reflected Officer Rodriguez's thorough documentation and the district attorney's recognition that family violence against children warranted serious prosecution. The formal charges included criminal mischief in the second-degree child endangerment and harassment, carrying potential penalties of up to 3 years in prison and $15,000 in fines. Gerald hired Thompson and Associates, a criminal defense firm from Springfield. But his attorney quickly advised him that the evidence against him was overwhelming and indisputable. Video footage from the community center's security cameras had captured the entire incident, showing Gerald's deliberate destruction of the laptop and Sophie's obvious distress. The prosecutor is willing to negotiate a plea agreement that would avoid jail time, Patricia Wells explained during our consultation about the criminal proceedings. But your father would have to accept full responsibility for his actions and agree to specific conditions regarding future contact with Sophie. The proposed plea agreement required Gerald to pay complete restitution for the destroyed MacBook plus additional damages for emotional distress totaling $4,200. He would also be required to complete anger management counseling and community service focused on child advocacy organizations. Most importantly, the agreement included a protective order limiting Gerald's contact with Sophie to supervised visits until he completed court-mandated therapy programs. Any violation of the supervision requirement would result in immediate arrest and prosecution for contempt of court. Amy faced separate charges for harassment and conspiracy after police reviewed her text messages demanding that I purchase Tyler a replacement laptop. Her threats about family inheritance and social consequences constituted criminal intimidation under Illinois law, particularly when combined with her role in orchestrating Tyler's sense of entitlement to Sophie's gift. The conspiracy charges stemmed from evidence that Amy had planned the laptop seizure in advance, preparing Tyler to claim ownership of Sophie's birthday present before the party began. Witness testimony from Tyler's school friends confirmed that he had bragged about receiving Sophie's computer days before her actual birthday. Amy's employer terminated her position permanently after the criminal charges became public record. Family Solutions Network issued a statement explaining that employees who engage in child abuse or harassment cannot maintain credibility as family advocates regardless of their professional qualifications or work history. Ms. Thompson's behavior directly contradicts our organizational mission of protecting children and strengthening healthy family relationships. The statement read, "We cannot employ someone whose personal conduct undermines the values we promote in our community programming." The professional consequences extended beyond Amy's immediate job loss when she discovered that her social work license was under review by the state regulatory board. Charges related to child endangerment could result in permanent suspension of her professional credentials, effectively ending her career in family services. Tyler's school principal implemented a comprehensive intervention plan addressing his bullying behavior and apparent lack of empathy for other children's feelings. The plan included mandatory counseling sessions with the school psychologist and a structured program focused on developing emotional intelligence and respect for for others' property. Tyler has been operating under the assumption that his wants automatically supersede other people's rights, explained Dr. Sarah Chen, the school psychologist assigned to his case. We need to help him understand that entitled behavior leads to social isolation and legal consequences. The intervention program required Amy to attend parenting classes, focused on setting appropriate boundaries and teaching children accountability for their actions. Her resistance to the program resulted in temporary suspension of her unsupervised visitation rights with Tyler, who was placed in the care of Amy's ex-husband until she demonstrated commitment to behavioral change. Martha's decision to file for divorce from Gerald after 42 years of marriage shocked everyone, except those who had witnessed her quiet transformation during Sophie's crisis. She hired her own attorney and moved into a small apartment downtown, finally claiming the independence she had been planning for years. I spent decades making excuses for Gerald's controlling behavior, Martha explained during a tearful conversation in her new living room. But watching him traumatize Sophie made me realize that loyalty to an abusive person is really just enabling continued harm. Her divorce proceedings revealed the extent of Gerald's financial manipulation and emotional intimidation throughout their marriage. Martha had been systematically isolated from friends and family members who might have questioned Gerald's treatment of her, creating a pattern of control that extended far beyond the laptop incident. The most satisfying legal victory came when Patricia Wells successfully negotiated a settlement requiring Gerald to establish a college fund for Sophie as additional restitution for the emotional trauma he had caused. The fund would receive monthly payments of $200 until Sophie reached 18, ensuring that his destructive actions would ultimately contribute to her educational opportunities. This sends a clear message that adults who harm children face long-term financial consequences, Patricia explained. Gerald's monthly payments will serve as a constant reminder of the damage he caused and his responsibility to support Sophie's future success. The court proceedings attracted local media attention with Channel 12, providing regular updates about the case and its implications for family violence prevention. The coverage reinforced community support for Sophie while creating additional accountability pressure for Gerald and Amy. 6 months after the birthday party incident, Gerald accepted the plea agreement rather than face trial and potential prison time. His formal guilty plea included a public apology, acknowledging that his behavior had been inappropriate and harmful to Sophie's emotional well-being. I allowed my anger and desire for control to override my responsibility to protect and nurture my granddaughter, Gerald's statement read. My actions on her birthday were inexcusable, and I accept full responsibility for the pain I caused. The apology felt hollow, given its obvious legal motivation, but it provided official acknowledgement of wrongdoing that would remain part of the public record permanently. Sophie would eventually be able to read court documents confirming that adult authority figures had recognized her grandfather's behavior as abusive and unacceptable. Amy's case concluded with a negotiated settlement, requiring her to complete extensive counseling focused on child welfare and family dynamics. She was also required to write a formal letter of apology to Sophie, acknowledging her role in orchestrating the laptop seizure and supporting Gerald's destructive response. Tyler began showing genuine improvement after 6 months of counseling and structured accountability at school. His therapist reported that he was developing empathy for other children and learning to express his needs without demanding immediate satisfaction regardless of circumstances. Tyler is beginning to understand that relationships require mutual respect and consideration, Dr. Chen explained. He's still working on impulse control, but he's no longer operating from the assumption that he's entitled to whatever he wants. The most meaningful transformation occurred in Sophie herself, who gradually regained confidence and trust in adult protection. She received a new MacBook Pro purchased with Gerald's restitution money, along with enrollment in advanced digital art classes that nurtured her creative talents. I don't feel scared of Grandpa anymore, she told me during one of our evening talks. I know that if someone tries to hurt me, other people will help me stay safe. Her resilience and capacity for healing inspired everyone involved in her case, from Officer Rodriguez to Patricia Wells to the teachers and counselors who supported her recovery. Sophie had learned that speaking truth about harmful behavior brings protection rather than punishment, a lesson that would serve her throughout her life. The legal resolution provided closure and accountability that private family negotiations could never have achieved. Gerald's guilty plea, Amy's professional consequences, and Tyler's therapeutic intervention established clear boundaries about acceptable treatment of children, while ensuring that Sophie's trauma was acknowledged and addressed through appropriate channels. Most importantly, the entire legal process had demonstrated to Sophie that adults were capable of protecting her from harm and holding wrongdoers accountable for their actions. She had witnessed the justice system working effectively on behalf of children, providing a foundation of trust that would guide her future relationships with authority figures. The transformation of our family dynamics became fully apparent during Sophie's 9th birthday party, held exactly 1 year after Gerald's destructive outburst at the community center. This celebration took place in our backyard under string lights and colorful banners, surrounded by friends who genuinely cared about Sophie's happiness, rather than viewing her as a target for adult dysfunction. Martha arrived early to help with decorations, her face radiant with the joy of someone who had finally escaped decades of oppression and control. Her divorce from Gerald had been finalized 3 months earlier, leaving her free to develop an authentic relationship with Sophie based on love rather than manipulation. Last year, I was terrified to speak up when Gerald hurt you, Martha told Sophie while they arranged flowers on the gift table. But now I know that protecting people I care about is more important than avoiding conflict with bullies. Sophie accepted her grandmother's explanation with the practical wisdom she had developed through surviving trauma and witnessing justice. At 9 years old, she understood that adults could make terrible mistakes, but still deserve forgiveness when they committed to genuine change and accountability. Sarah arrived with a beautiful custom easel she had commissioned from a local woodworker designed specifically for Sophie's digital art projects. Our co-parenting relationship had strengthened dramatically after the crisis built on mutual respect and shared commitment to Sophie's well-being rather than mere convenience. I'm proud of how brave you were when mean people tried to hurt you, Sarah told Sophie during the gift opening. You showed everyone that children deserve to be treated with kindness and respect. The party guests included Jessica Martinez and her daughter Emma David Kim and his son Michael, plus several other families who had become genuine friends rather than mere acquaintances. These relationships had deepened through shared experience of witnessing injustice and supporting Sophie's recovery. Tyler was notably absent from the celebration, still participating in court-mandated counseling and earning supervised visitation rights with extended family members. His transformation remained a work in progress, but early reports suggested genuine improvement in his empathy and impulse control. Amy had moved to Kentucky to live with her sister while completing her professional rehabilitation requirements. The distance provided space for healing while ensuring that Sophie wouldn't encounter hostile family members during her continued recovery process. Gerald had relocated to Phoenix as Martha predicted, living near his brother and working part-time at a landscaping company that hired older workers. His monthly payments to Sophie's college fund arrived promptly through automatic bank transfer, providing ongoing accountability for his actions without requiring direct contact. The most meaningful gift came from Patricia Wells, who presented Sophie with a legal document establishing the Sophie Thompson Foundation for Children's Advocacy. The foundation would use restitution money from Gerald's case to provide legal support for other children facing family abuse or negligence. Your courage in speaking truth about what happened to you will help protect other kids who face similar situations, Patricia explained. Sometimes the most powerful thing victims can do is transform their pain into protection for others. Sophie listened carefully to this explanation before asking thoughtful questions about how the foundation would work and what kinds of help it could provide. Her natural empathy and desire to prevent other children from experiencing similar trauma demonstrated the resilience and compassion that had made her Gerald's target in the first place. Officer Rodriguez stopped by the party during her patrol shift, bringing a personalized police badge with Sophie's name engraved on it. The gesture symbolized law enforcement's commitment to protecting children and reinforced Sophie's understanding that speaking up about abuse brings support rather than punishment. "You taught all the adults in this case important lessons about courage and justice," Rodriguez told Sophie. "Police officers need brave kids like you to help us know when someone needs protection." The new MacBook Pro sat prominently on the gift table, no longer a symbol of destroyed dreams, but rather evidence of justice achieved and family boundaries established. Sophie used it daily for her art projects and homework, each keystroke representing triumph over those who had tried to diminish her worth and happiness. During the evening cleanup, Sophie helped Martha pack leftover cake while reflecting on the changes the past year had brought. "I'm glad Grandpa Gerald had to say sorry and pay for hurting me," she said. "Maybe now he knows that breaking people's things is wrong." Her matter-of-fact assessment of justice revealed a sophisticated understanding of accountability and consequences that would serve her well throughout life. She had learned that forgiveness didn't require tolerating continued abuse, and that protecting herself was a responsibility rather than selfishness. As guests departed with expressions of genuine affection and promises of continued friendship, I reflected on the profound transformation that had emerged from what initially appeared to be simple family conflict. Sophie's crisis had revealed authentic character in people I thought I understood, while exposing dysfunction that had been hidden beneath facade of family loyalty. The legal process had provided more than financial restitution and criminal accountability. It had demonstrated to Sophie that society contained systems and people committed to protecting children from adult dysfunction, regardless of family relationships or social pressure to maintain false peace. Most importantly, Sophie had learned that her voice carried power when raised in defense of truth and justice. She understood that speaking up about harmful behavior brought protection and support, rather than punishment and isolation, a lesson that would guide her interactions with authority figures throughout her life. The foundation established in her name would ensure that other children facing family abuse could access the legal advocacy and emotional support that had been crucial to her recovery. Sophie's trauma was being transformed into protection for future victims, creating meaning from pain and purpose from injustice. 2 years later, Sophie continues to thrive academically and artistically, her digital creations winning recognition in statewide competitions that celebrate young people's creativity and talent. She speaks confidently about her experiences, when appropriate, helping other children understand that they deserve protection from adult dysfunction. Her relationship with Martha remains strong and authentic, built on mutual respect rather than manipulation or control. Sarah and I have developed an effective co-parenting partnership that prioritizes Sophie's needs over our own convenience or comfort, demonstrating that divorced parents can still provide unified protection for their children. The Sophie Thompson Foundation has helped 12 other families navigate legal challenges related to child abuse and family violence, providing both financial resources and emotional support during difficult transitions. Each case reinforces the lesson that individual courage can create systemic change when channeled through appropriate institutions and community support. Looking back on the destroyed MacBook that initiated this entire journey, I realized that Gerald's act of destruction ultimately created more protection and justice than any single gift could have provided. Sophie learned that she was worth defending, that truth brings consequences for wrongdoers, and that speaking up about abuse serves the broader community rather than just individual victims. The experience taught me that protecting children sometimes requires accepting the loss of relationships with adults who view kids as expendable or controllable. Family loyalty that enables abuse isn't really loyalty at all, but rather complicity disguised as tradition or peacekeeping. Have you ever had to choose between family harmony and protecting someone you love from harmful treatment? Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is establish firm boundaries that prevent continued abuse, even when doing so creates conflict with people we've always tried to please. Standing up for children takes courage, but it creates safety that allows them to develop into confident, empathetic adults who understand their own worth. Thank you for listening to Sophie's story and mine. I hope it reminds you that every child deserves protection, respect, and advocates who will fight for their well-being regardless of family politics or social pressure. Please share this story with others who might need to hear that speaking truth about abuse brings support rather than punishment. Like this video? If it resonated with you, subscribe for more stories about overcoming family dysfunction, and comment below with your own experiences of choosing courage over comfort when someone you loved needed protection. Remember that your voice matters, your boundaries are important, and children are always worth defending.